Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We're going to talk today about getting started with taxonomy. And this is a topic that is very important in the work of managing content. And I want to give you an introductory perspective about taxonomy. So this will be appropriate for people who don't have any background in taxonomy, but for those of you who do know something about taxonomy as well, I hope I can give you some additional knowledge that you can build on. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Andrews, and I'm Content Strategy Evangelist at Kentico Content. I've been working in the area of content strategy and user experience for the past 2 decades, and taxonomy is a topic that often comes up in my work with people because it's a topic that's important, but people often don't know a lot about it. So what we're going to cover today is a broad agenda. I'm going to talk for maybe 30 minutes or so, and we'll cover the following. I'm going to talk about what a taxonomy is, what it can cover, how you can use a taxonomy, how you can create a taxonomy, and apply it. So we will go through this and we will have a very broad discussion, as I said. So how can we use a taxonomy? Well, if you're familiar at all with taxonomy from any formal schooling that you have had, you may have encountered it in biology class. So biologists use taxonomies to classify things like plants and animals. And you probably remember seeing these Latin names, which would indicate what family something belonged to or what species something is. And biologists have used taxonomies for several centuries now to classify how related things are, if they're very related or not so related. And this very same idea has been taken up by people who work with content in the past few decades. So what is a content taxonomy? I would give this as a definition. It's a hierarchical listing of standardized terms used to describe your content. So let me unpack that because I know there's a bit there. There's 3 key ideas I want you to focus on. One is that it's hierarchical. So we have different levels. There are broader levels and narrower levels. And this is very powerful because it lets us adjust the level of detail that we are describing. We have a standardized terminology. So everyone is using the same terms to refer to what they're talking about. And these terms are descriptive. So what that means is that we want the terms to be very clear as to what they refer to. They should be self-describing. There shouldn't need to be a lot of explanation about what the term means. They're very, very clear. So 3 ideas here, and if we keep these 3 ideas in mind, we will actually be very far along with understanding what we need to do in creating and using a taxonomy. So taxonomies are used to tag content items. Now, when I say a content item, I'm not talking about a web page. A web page is made up of content items. But these are the kind of building blocks from which you create a piece of full, complete content that people will see, either a web page or an app or whatever it is. And these content items could be things like blocks of text, or they could be images or videos or charts. It could be a whole host of things. And what we want to do is tag them with taxonomy terms so that people know what this refers to. We may use one term, but often we'll want to use several terms because we'll be able to get a lot more value out of the item when we describe it as completely as we can. So what does a taxonomy cover? And this is something that people have some ideas about, but they may not be thinking about all the possibilities. So let's look at this in detail. So the first thing that a taxonomy will commonly cover is what you're talking about in the content. And for many organizations, that will be the products and the services that their content talks about. You offer products and services, you're writing content relating to these products and services, and you want to tag that content to indicate which products and services you're discussing. And that may be at a higher level because you're talking about a category of products or services, or it could be very, very specific. Another thing that organizations often create content about is advice content. So you may be giving advice about how to plan for the future or how to deal with some issue that a customer will be encountering. And this is also very useful to tag in your taxonomy to indicate what the advice concerns. So while these are the most common things that people use a taxonomy for, we're not at all limited to this. Another really useful thing to indicate is for whom the content items are intended. Now, in many organizations, you may have some sort of customer segmentation or audience segmentation. And that's going to vary according to what kind of organization you work for. Some organizations will distinguish business buyers from consumers. Others will look at different kinds of households. Others will look at people who work in different industries, or maybe around someone's expertise level. However you think about the differences in your customers is a good way to reflect that in your taxonomy. It will help you identify which items are intended for which audience. And one more thing that we can cover in our taxonomy is when the content is needed. And this is very handy because a lot of times we create content to address very specific situations. So some content is created to support different stages of the customer journey, or content's there to help people in a certain scenario. If something happens and they need to access content to figure out what to do. Other times we create content in order to be used in a very particular setting. So some content may be particularly useful in a retail environment, inside a store, or maybe it's particularly useful when someone's at home, or possibly while they're on travel. It can vary quite a lot, but you want to think about the different situations that people may need this content, and if there's anything special about those situations. And if there is, that should be reflected in your taxonomy. So we've talked a little bit about the range of things that a taxonomy can cover, but how do you apply it? So what's really the payoff for having a taxonomy and using it? Well, again, there's a range of things, and not everyone is always thinking about all these things together. So I'd divide this into three areas. We have planning, so how we plan our content, what I call orchestration, how we put our content together, and then engagement, how people use our content. So at planning, we're thinking about how the CMS can manage our content, and the CMS will know that the items are tagged with certain taxonomy terms, and that will be very useful to authors. So authors can locate items according to topic, for example, or according to audience, and they'll be able to find things and see what's been created already, and that will help them plan what they may want to create next. They also have the ability to track items by taxonomy. So you can connect your taxonomy to your analytics and see how content is performing according to what topics it covers or who it is intended for. So authors can make good advantage of taxonomies, but how about other people? Well, people who work in user experience design and front-end development also use taxonomies, and they use them to help orchestrate the items that need to come together to be delivered to audiences. So they can use the taxonomies to help assemble items together. And as we know, a taxonomy shows relationships between things. So they can find items that have similar tags and bring them together and provide the exact details that customers are looking for. And then once the content is delivered to customers, they also want to engage with it. They want to be able to find the precise content and information that they're looking for. So the taxonomy can help them navigate through the content. It can sometimes support things like filtering content. So the customers also take advantage of the taxonomy. So we can see there are a lot of different stakeholders who can benefit from a taxonomy, and really important to think about all these people as you develop a taxonomy. So what does a taxonomy look like? Well, we've mentioned already that it's a hierarchical listing of terminology. And let's see what this looks like in practice. And this is a simple example, but we have an example here where a company is making products for pets. And we can see the hierarchy. In this case, we're moving from left to right. So we have all pets at the far left, and then we break that down into dogs and cats. And dogs and cats, in turn, are broken out by their age. So here we have 3 levels in this example. The products that are for all pets, it might be something like a gift certificate that could be applied to any product. We have products that are for all dogs. And then you have products that are for adult dogs only and products that are for puppies only. And when we look at the hierarchy, there actually are a couple of terms that we use in the taxonomy world that help us think about the relationships between terms. So one of them is a parent term and child term. And in this example, we have pets being the parent term of the child term dogs. So dogs is a child of pets, and that shows the relationship in the hierarchy. Now, we also have the possibility of having 2 terms that are at the same level that have a common parent. And these are referred to as siblings. So in our case here, we have adult dogs and puppies are siblings. Now, I know in real life, we wouldn't think of adult dogs and puppies as being siblings, but in the world of taxonomy, that's how we would refer to these. So let's talk how we get a taxonomy like that. How do you get to develop and use a taxonomy? And really, there are 2 different tasks. One is developing the taxonomy, which gives you the terms that you have that you can use to tag your content items, and that's the applying the taxonomy. Now, the developing the taxonomy is frankly a lot more work, so I'm going to spend more attention to that topic here in this webinar. And there really are 3 different related aspects. You need to figure out the topics you want to cover, the distinctions you want to make within those topics, and the specific terms you want to use when you're talking about the topics. All right, now these are interrelated, and in fact, they influence one another. So you will find this is an iterative process. As you start to work through these decisions, you will realize that each of them influence one another, and you'll continually refine the topics and the distinctions and the terms as you start to figure out what you want to do. Now, people ask often, what is the best way to get started? And often it's really to start with terms that you already are thinking about. And you don't want to stay wedded to those terms. You want to just use them as a starting point and then think about what they represent. Are they Are they clear? Do they overlap? Are they capturing everything that you want to capture? And as you refine it, you start adjusting terms, adding some, deleting some, changing some, and seeing what that means. So let's look a little bit about the terminology itself. The first step really is to gather terms you use in your organization. And you want to cast a wide net. You want to find out what your colleagues, not just on your immediate team, but across your organization, the terminology that they're using to talk about things that are being discussed in your content. And oftentimes, different parts of your organization will be talking about things in slightly different ways. It may be because they work in a different function, or maybe because they're in a different business unit that's doing something a little bit differently than you. That's fine. You just want to get these terms and have a sense of what everyone is already using to talk about things that are being discussed in your content. And then you want to decide one best term to use for your enterprise content. Now, the goal here, again, is to standardize the term. So it reduces the ambiguity. Everyone can use one term, and it's going to make this much more efficient to identify our content items when we have a single term used. That doesn't mean that everyone in your company or your organization needs to talk in the same way when they're talking among themselves. It's more just to tag the content in the CMS to identify what the content item relates to. There's different ways we can decide what the best term is. One popular approach is called card sorting. I don't really have time today to get into that, but there are different approaches you can use to decide the best term among the many that you may have. And next, you want to define that term, really indicate what its scope is. This will reduce any lingering uncertainty about what we're talking about. If someone wonders, gee, does this cover this area? You say, well, no, it covers A, but it doesn't cover B. If you need to address B, you should use a different term. And that will really help everyone be on the same page as far as what the term refers to. And the final step is to take all those terms that you first gathered and to map them to your preferred term. So you've standardized on a term now, you've really clearly defined what it means, and you want to map these other terms that other people in your organization are using so that they know when they think about something in a certain way that they should be looking for this particular standardized term. Okay, so that's a bit about the process. Now I want to give you some tips or best practices for taxonomies. And I'm doing this because people make some very common errors when they develop taxonomies that cause them some problems down the road. So my first tip for you is to make sure each child has only one parent. And what that means is that terms should only belong to one broader term. So on the left side, we have kittens, and kittens belong to a broader parent category of cats. On the right side, we have kittens showing up in two places. It belongs to two broader categories. Now, logically, that makes sense. We could say kittens belong to cats and kittens belong to non-adult pets. And in fact, some organizations decide they want to do this. And I understand why they want to do it. It seems like it might offer them some additional flexibility. But the reality is that you're introducing a certain degree of complication here. You're making it more complex. And because you're doing that, you have to be more vigilant, or else you're going to have some additional problems down the road. So what I would really encourage you to do is just to stick with having one parent for each child. Now, it will benefit you to do that, and frankly, you should be able to achieve anything you need to by following this advice. The other approach shouldn't be necessary. My next tip for you is to make sure that siblings are mutually exclusive. So that means the terms don't overlap. There's no confusion about what term to use. So on the left side, we have dogs being divided according to age, and we have adult dogs and puppies. And we can see that those are different ideas. Now, puppies are not adult dogs. We, of course, want to define at what age a puppy becomes an adult dog, but we won't have any kind of dog being both an adult dog and a puppy at the same time. On the right side, we have adult dogs and elderly dogs. So we used age to categorize things, but these are not mutually exclusive. Obviously, some adult dogs are elderly dogs, and all elderly dogs are adult dogs. So there's going to be some confusion there. And in order to get past this confusion, you need to do one of two things. You would either make elderly dogs a child of adult dogs, so it's no longer a sibling, or if you wanted to have them as siblings and you wanted to differentiate elderly dogs from adult dogs that aren't elderly, you'd need to relabel the term to something like non-elderly adult dogs. And I know that's not very elegant, but you'd need to do something like that. Okay, my third tip for you is to make each term unique. Now, you don't want to ever rely on context to differentiate terms. So on the left side, we have dogs and cats broken down by their age. And we have adult cats and we have adult dogs. On the right side, we've referred to adult cats as just adults and adult dogs as adults. Now, here we have two terms that in context, they look like they're different things, but taken out of context, we have one term that actually refers to two different things, and that's going to cause a lot of confusion. So make sure each of the terms you use is unique. My final tip as far as developing a taxonomy concerns how deep do you go? How much detail should you go into? And it's a common question people have. And my guidance here is to break down categories if they're important. And conversely, don't break them down if they're not important. So let's look at an example here to see what that would mean in practice. On the left side, we have dogs broken down into adult dogs, and we've then broken the adult dogs down by size. And so if you were selling dog carriers or dog beds, those are products that can vary in size. And we know that adult dogs themselves vary in size. They're all different kinds of sizes. So it makes sense to break down adult dogs according to size. Now, on the right side, this is a different scenario. You're not selling dog carriers, you're just selling dog food. So it makes sense to distinguish adult dogs from puppies because they have different formulas. But for adult dogs, all adult dogs eat the same kind of food, regardless of what size they are. So there's no value in breaking down adult dogs by size here. It just adds complexity and it doesn't really help you at all. So left side, you'd want to do it. Right side, you wouldn't want to do it. Okay, so we've had 4 tips now for developing a taxonomy. I'm going to give you one more tip, and this relates to how you apply a taxonomy. And that is to choose the most precise terms, making sure you choose the narrowest terms that are accurate. So the example here in the center is a photo showing a puppy and a kitten. So we would want to tag this item as relating to both puppies and kittens. Now, logically, you could tag it just saying pets. And it's logically correct, but it's not as useful to do that. We don't really know what kind of pets are in this item, and we don't know if it's a goldfish, for example. So it really is helpful to have to use the most specific terms that are accurate. So we've covered quite a lot here. We've covered what a taxonomy is, how it's used, what it can cover, a little bit about the process of developing it, and a few tips on how to avoid problems that could develop. So let me just leave you with a few takeaways here. The really important thing is that you have a taxonomy that gets used by your authors. You want them to be tagging the content with taxonomy terms, because if it's not tagged with taxonomy terms, you're not going to get the value out of the taxonomy. Now, the best way to get people involved with tagging content is really to involve them in the process of defining the taxonomy. You want to think about the terms you use. You want to involve a wide range of people, get the stakeholders to buy into the process, to see the value of what you're doing, to be able to explain to them the different ways that taxonomies can be applied. That supports the authors, supports the delivery of the content, supports how customers use the content. You want to convey all that, and you want to work together with your colleagues to develop this. So I really encourage you to reach out across your organization and to start this process of engaging with your colleagues to figure out what you need to have in your taxonomy. Thanks very much for joining me today, and I look forward to talking to you again in a future webinar that we will host.